Let's talk about using function notation to determine specific values. Function notation uses f of x instead of a y. So, if a question asks you to find f of 2, they're giving you the x value and asking you to find y. Versus if a question says f of x equals 2, f of x is the same thing as y. They're giving you the y value and asking you to find x. Let's practice that when you're given an equation, when you're given a graph, and then when you're given a word problem. Example 1, find the specified values for h of x equals x squared plus 3x minus 4. H of 0. All right, remember normally this is h of x. Now it's h of 0. So they are just telling you, let's sub in a 0. That's all we're doing. So everywhere you see an x, only the x, we're going to replace it with zeros. Do that in your head or type it into your calculator, and you'll get -4. Similar idea for part B. They're giving us the x value and asking us to sub in a -2. So everywhere you see an x up here, you need to sub in a -2. The parentheses here are very important because you want to make sure that you square a negative number instead of squaring and then making it negative. When you type it into your calculator, make sure you use parentheses or multiply it correctly. Otherwise, you could end up with -14. So make sure you square that negative number correctly to get a -6 and not -14. All right, one more problem before we use the other type of question they could ask you. You don't necessarily have to be given a number. You could be given a variable. And it is okay, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to replace both of my x's everywhere you see an x with x minus 1. Simplify this. For me, that means distribute to get rid of parentheses and then combine like terms. You cannot just distribute this square to both of these pieces. That's not how it works. Remember, you have to FOIL or double distribution here. Distribute the x to both pieces and distribute the -1 to both pieces. And now I can distribute my 3 and then combine like terms. I only have one x squared piece. I have multiple x pieces. All right, let's do 2 more though. Now I'm saying h of x equals 0. I'm telling you h of x, y equals 0. Find the x values. So take this equation and set it equal to 0. Now what? You have to solve this. You can't just stop here. Solve it by factoring. You can use the quadratic formula. You can complete the square even though it gets messy. I'm going to factor because it's pretty straightforward. I need to come up with 2 numbers that multiply to -4 and add to +3. And now set each factor equal to 0. That's my first answer. That's my second answer. So if I sub a -4 back into the original equation, I'll have 0. And if I sub a +1 back into the original equation, my y value will be 0. We could do the same idea here. It doesn't have to be equal to 0. I can set my equation equal to any y value and solve. Before you can factor, though, it's got to be equal to 0. So I have to subtract my 66 over to the other side first. And now factor. If you can't factor, use quadratic formula or possibly complete the square. Come up with two numbers that multiply to negative 70 and add to positive 3. Set them both equal to 0. And those are my answers. Okay, well, what happens now if you have a graph instead of an equation? Let me remind you, f of 2 means I'm giving you the x value, you find the y value. F of x equals 2 means I'm giving you the y value, you find the x value. So all you're doing here is finding the coordinate points when you have a graph. So f of negative 2, I'm giving you the x value. So x is negative 2. 1, 2. I guess I should have labeled these. At x equals negative 2, this is the coordinate point on my graph, and that y value is negative 4. Done. F of 1, I'm giving you the x value is 1. So at 1, this is the coordinate point on my graph. That coordinate point is 1, 2. So f of 1 is positive 2. Notice I can rewrite this function notation as a coordinate point x, y, x, y. All right, this next piece, I'm giving you the y value is 0, and you have to find the x value. So remember, this is my x-axis, this is my y-axis. So on my y-axis is 0. Anywhere on this y equals 0 line, which means I have multiple places that I have coordinate points on my graph. Here, here, and here. You need to give all three answers. So f of x equals 0 at x equals 0, x equals 2, and x equals 5.5. That means I have the coordinate points 0, 0, 2, 0, and 5.50 on my graph. That one was kind of weird because it was the axis, so it may be more helpful to see this last part. F of x equals 2, I'm giving you the y value. So on your y axis, go to 2. So where on this line do I have coordinate points? Well, I have a coordinate point here and here. So at x equals 1 and x equals 6. Oh. The coordinate points would be 1, 2, and 6, 2. So all you're doing here is just picking out coordinate points. Pay attention to whether they're giving you the x piece of the coordinate point or the y piece. Since most of these graphs should be functions, if they give you the x piece, there should only be one y. But if they give you a y piece, there can be multiple x's. Okay, let's do one last type of problem. We're going to be doing the same thing where I'm giving you either the x or the y, and you have to give me the other part. But this time we're going to look at word problems. Bill spends $15 each time he travels the toll roads. He started the month with $2.25 in his toll road account. The amount, A, in dollars he has left in the account after T trips is given by this equation. Before we even get to the questions here, it really helps you to pay attention to your units. What are the A, what are the X units, and what are the Y units? All right, so we are told instead of f of x, we use a of t. So my entire equation is this a equation. Well, what is a? A, my whole equation, is dollars, or the amount of money he has. That's my a, that's my whole equation. I guess we don't really care about x or y here. I'm subbing in t here. That's instead of f of x, it's a of t. where I'm using t's in the equations. So t tells me trips. So question number 1, or question part A says, how much money is left in the account after 9 trips? So they're giving you this number here, 9 trips. What is that? 9, the units here are trips. So it's not the overall equation. That was what this piece was. The overall equation is in dollars. It is the input. So I want to just use 9 and use it as my input, sub it in.
Multiply that out.
And the answer is $90. What about part B? How many trips can he take until the account is empty? So they don't straight up give us a number, but they're implying it when they say the account is empty. They're saying the account equals $0. Empty is no money left. Account. So the overall equation. So my whole equation is equal to 0, which means my y values are equal to 0. Account is what the equation is. Set your equation equal to 0 and solve for t.
So subtract your 225 over to the other side and divide by negative 15, and you'll get that
t equals, it happens to also be 15. And include units with your answer because this is a word problem. Let's do another example just to clarify because word problems can get tricky. A railroad crew lays track each day. The length, L, in miles, that is left to lay after D days is given by this equation. So my overall equation here is miles. My equation tells you miles, and I'm subbing in D is what is part of the equation here, and D tells me days. Part A, how many days will it take to lay all the track? So they don't straight up give you a number again, but they're telling you we've laid all the track. That means the length in miles that's left to lay. There's nothing left to lay. I don't have any more track. So my equation equals 0. I have 0 miles left of track. So you need to set your equation equal to 0 and solve. A little messy, but we got there. And for part B, how many miles are left to lay after 18 days? They are giving us 18 days. They are telling us days, so they're giving us this little D value here.
sub that into your calculator and
You will get 60, so there are 60. Make sure you use units. This whole equation is in miles, so there's 60 miles left after 18 days.